Hi there, it's Nicole here today with a one-layer card featuring no line coloring with colored pencils on craft cardstock. Craft cardstock is one of my very favorite mediums for using colored pencils because I think the contrast between the neutral, yes, but colored background creates this stunning contrast between the colored pencils and your background rather than just being a basic white. To start, I am taking the second largest A2 double stitched frame and I am centering it on a piece of A2 sized Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. This is a fantastic smooth craft cardstock for coloring on with colored pencils, especially I find. And then I'm using the embossing sandwich for the Spellbinders die cutting machine to die cut, or pardon me, not die cut, emboss this frame rather than die cut this into my background. So even though this is a one layer, it adds this really cool decorative touch. Next, I am going to use a stamp positioner tool. I'm using the Misty to position stamp images from Feelin, Foxy, and Busy Bees onto the center of this scene, and I am stamping these images with a really light ink. For this particular card, I am using the Simon Says Stamp Fog ink, but any light ink will do. Just something that isn't going to have a really harsh dark outline is kind of what we're looking for here. While you have your stamps out, be sure to create any masks that you might need for anything that might be overlaid. For instance, in this card, I'm going to need a mask for the fox, and I'm going to also need a mask for a couple of the flowers. The butterflies, you don't need a mask for those. And for most of the images, you're not even going to need a full mask. You're just going to need a partial one for anything that's overlaid. A really good tip when you're creating masks is lay out your stamp images on your background before you stamp anything. It gives you a really good idea of what's going to be in the foreground of the card. That needs to be stamped first, and then you can start working on the things that are in the background of the card. For this card, the foreground is the fox image, and then everything else is going to be back behind that. That includes the flowers, stems, leaves, and then other than that, the butterflies are not going to overlap at all. The flowers, leaves, and stems are all from Busy Bees. The fox and butterflies are from Feelin, Foxy. One of my favorite things is to combine images from multiple stamp sets to create unique designs. I love the scale here, almost like this fox is sitting in this oversized garden of flowers is kind of my thinking, kind of hiding amongst them or something like that. Very colorful flowers and butterflies are going to really help with the bright, colorful, spring type feel of this card design. So I've got a mask for my fox, I've got a mask for my first flower, and then I am ready to go ahead and stamp some stems or a stem and my other flower, and then I will finish with my final stem. I have left this in all just a little, I've sped it up a little bit, but I've left it in so that you can see exactly what gets stamped where. So I tried to stamp multiple images at one time to make it go a little faster, and then I would add a mask, and then I would stamp the next set of images. Some of the images did not require masks, like the leaves and things. And another note is this ink, when I first stamp it, looks pretty dark, but look at that butterfly up in the top right corner. It was stamped at the same time as the fox, and it's a lot lighter than the rest of the images, and that's because this is a dye ink. As it absorbs into the cardstock, it's going to lighten a little bit, which provides an even better line. Once you've added the colored pencil on top, it kind of, kind of quote unquote erases that line so you don't really see it. When I pull the mask off the fox, you can see how much lighter the fox is already. So everything is lightening up. Now I pulled that mask off, forgetting that I really did want to add one more flower over to the left of the fox. I am a big fan of odd number of embellishments. Plus, I felt like everything was shifted just a lot to the right, and that last final, that third flower is really going to round it out nicely and provide some nice balance and fill out the rest of that embossed frame that we did at the beginning. So we've added the flower. We're going to just pop that mask in place again and add one final stem as well as one leaf. Get that last leaf here real quick. Once I have all of these images, it's time to start coloring. And I decided to do my coloring, and once all of the coloring is complete, we will start or add any finishing details and add any additional stamping and embossing, which is going to be the greeting and then the little butterfly trails, which are actually from Busy Bees, and they were the bee trails. One of my very favorite parts of colored pencils on craft is white on craft cardstock. This is really where the colorful background comes in super handy because you really get that fantastic contrast. I did start with the white area of the fox, even though I do want to pull in a little brown somewhere to give it a little bit more interest. And then I'm going to start working on coloring in the rest of the fox. I have sped up the coloring quite a bit, but just like with all the stamping and masking, I did leave in all of the coloring, plus I listed the colors of the POLYCHROMOS colored pencils that I'm using somewhere on the screen. I tried to keep it out of where I'm actually coloring too much so that you could have a reference if you have the same colored pencils so you know exactly what I'm using, and just to kind of give you an idea of how many I used per color family or per image on this card. I've also used a little GAMSOL with stump pencils to blend out my colored pencil lines. I don't mind the colored pencil lines a whole lot, but I do think that blending it softens the look even more, and especially as I color more and more of this design in, I really think it makes a huge difference in the overall look and feel of the card. You can really see that cute little fox starting to take shape here. Go ahead and do the rest of him. It's kind of funny where I started on him. Instead of the face, I started on the body and then moved to the face. But whichever way you choose to color is absolutely fine. The eyes, I did try to color around them a little bit. You can still slightly see them. One thing about no line coloring, and I'm by no means an expert, it's just something that I do a little bit here and there, and I'm more comfortable with no line coloring with colored pencils than I am with any other medium for whatever reason. I'm not very good with Copic markers at all, but I really think it's important if you are coloring an image that has a face to make sure you go back in with some sort of black pen later after you've done your coloring and add that detail back in. I'm a big fan, and you guys probably have seen me do it before. When I'm coloring in images, I almost always, I'd say 99% of the time, go in with a black pen and add detail to the eyes, no matter what I'm using to color. And in this case, it's super important because that face is really important to the overall design of the card, and that black instantly adds interest. Now, I will wait until the black is completely dry before I go back with a white pen and add those highlights back in, but I will do that a little bit closer to the end of the card. Next, I am coloring in all of the greenery. I did try to color just one section at a time. So we started with the fox. All those first colors that I showed were for the fox. Next, we're doing anything green, and this is only 2 colors of the POLYCHROMOS colored pencils, a dark and a light green, and then blending out with GAMSOL and a stump pencil. And look how awesome. It's really starting to kind of take shape, and I'm drawing in some grass with my colored pencils, going right over part of the fox images in a few areas even, and I think that just helps ground the scene even more. For the flowers, I chose to do 3 different colors, but tried to keep them all within the same color family. So the first one has got more of a pinky purple feel, I would say, and the middle flower will have more of a red feel, and finally a very purpley type of flower. But my first one is definitely pink, a light pink base, and then some darker colors, magentas coming from the center. And then the center of the flower I kept yellow, but I don't want it to be so yellow that it's glaring yellow, if that makes sense. This is where I'm going to add the yellow, and you're going to see that it's very, very yellow, but I'm going to take that dark color from the flower and blend it up into the yellow to have that nice gradient where it goes from yellow to the flower color. And then I did take a white pen and add some little dot detail to the center of the flower for additional interest. Same thing for my remaining 2 flowers. The flower itself is going to be the colorful colored pencil, in this case the pinks and the reds, and then the center is the yellow, and we're going to blend that darker red color up into the yellow so it has a much more natural looking feel, but still has those 2 different colors. And this flower kind of gave me a little bit of trouble for whatever reason, but I eventually got it colored and shaded the way I wanted it to look, and finished with some little white dots in the center again. We're going to go to the final flower now, and this is a more full flower, not the kind of half flower that the other 2 were. And this one's going to be purple with a yellow center and blending that deeper, darker purple into the yellow of this flower as well. And this flower definitely benefits from the GAMSOL. I think it looked really unfinished before adding the GAMSOL and smoothing out those colored pencil lines, and then adding those little lines coming out from the center in, and of course blending that into the yellow in the center of the flower. And just blending, adding some little white dots, adding the highlights to the nose and to the eyes. I am taking a fine tip black pen now and drawing in the body of the butterfly. The butterflies are pretty small, and a fine tip pen worked better than the gel pen that I used for the eyes, I really think. Sometimes the gel pen has a tendency to maybe make a bigger dot than what I really want, and I didn't want to lose the detail of the antenna or anything like that on the butterflies. A great base color for these butterflies is white, and then blending that blue kind of on top, it gives it almost an ombre look without having to have tons of different color. I outlined the butterfly wings with my darker colors, blended out with white, and then went in and colored over the white with my blue colors to get the look that I wanted. Adding some little white dot detail to the butterfly wings, adding white detail to my flowers, to the leaves as highlights, onto my fox as highlights. All those little things are really going to make a 1-layer card pop and really be spectacular. Now that the coloring is finished, we're going to take the little dotted trails here from the Busy Bees stamp set, and they work fantastic for these butterflies from Feelin Foxy, and a hello greeting from the Foxy Sentiments stamp set. And I want to make sure and use a powder tool here because I'm going to stamp all of this with Versamark ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. I went ahead and added all 3 images onto my MISTI, stamped them all at once. We'll remove that, grab that white embossing powder and sprinkle it on. You want to make sure you get a really good full coverage of that white embossing powder. I think the white really picks up the white undertones and white coloring on the images, as well as the highlights and things. I didn't want anything dark black for the front of my card at all. Other than the eyes or the bodies of the butterflies, everything else is just a color and no line. If you get any embossing powder flakes anywhere you don't want them, a great thing to do is to take a paintbrush, a dry paintbrush, and just kind of flick those away so that you don't or heat emboss those rather, onto your project. And moving my heat gun keep it moving so I don't scorch the paper. I want to heat and melt that embossing powder on those 3 areas. And there is the front of my card all finished. Next, for the inside of the card, to finish it off nicely, also from the Foxy Sentiments stamp set, we're going to take You're Such A and then Special and Friend and combine those for a greeting. One of my favorite things about honeybee stamps is all the different ways you can mix and match their sentiments for a card design. It's fantastic, and it just really extends the life of the greetings. You can say exactly what you want to say, and this finishes off the inside of the card beautifully. It coordinates so nicely with what's on the front. So the greeting is, hello, you're such a special friend. I think that's just really, really fun. We'll stamp that with black ink, and then finally, I have stamped this on a white top fold card base on the inside. We're going to take our panel that we colored and adhere that to the front of our card with some nice strong adhesive. And that is really all that is needed for this 1-layer colored pencil card featuring several different stamp sets and dies from Honeybee Stamps. Thanks for joining me today for this 1-layer card with colored pencils. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Please be sure to check out the Honeybee blog for more information. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.